So Lama Yeshe, I actually had a meeting with Lama Yeshe like after I'd been on this retreat for about 2 weeks. It was a month-long retreat, like very intensive. We'd get up at about 4:30 in the morning, just as the dawn was arising, and we'd be sitting on the edge of the hill looking over Kathmandu, drinking Tibetan tea, which has butter in it, and it's like a sort of very particular taste. So we'd all be sitting there drinking our Tibetan tea, like having sort of feeling like, oh my God, what on earth am I doing here, kind of thing. And but as the retreat went on, it just was an extraordinary experience of immersion into meditation.
Right.
And I had a personal meeting with Lama Yeshe during that time, which was again, I was just amazed by this person, how at peace he was, and how insightful, and just himself, just completely himself. And it was that in itself was more of an experience than anything else. So in a very real way, I sort of now think back to him in a very real way as being my first teacher.
Right. Yeah, I think I had quite a different experience, because when I arrived in India, I was on this thing. I really wanted to be alone, and I'd learnt Hindi, I'd studied Sanskrit, so I wasn't really looking for Western enclaves in a way. I was trying to keep away from, but I also at the same time, because I came in through Calcutta, and the first place I ended up, someone said to me, I knew nothing, really, nothing at all about India and where to go, and someone said, oh, you should go to Bodh Gaya. It's the birthplace, the enlightenment place, the Buddha. And so I ended up in Bodh Gaya, took a train from Calcutta, and that's where I actually first encountered this wave. I realized, because there were a lot of Westerners there, because the border to Kathmandu, to Nepal, had been shut. I can't remember why. There was a king change or something, and so there were a lot of people who would have been going up to Kathmandu for these retreats, actually, a lot of them.
Oh, so you'd heard about those retreats, actually?
Yeah, well, they were all talking about them, right? And also people would go up to trek and, this sort of thing. But largely, so a lot of people, more people than usual there. And I was torn between sort of spending time with all these people, because everyone was smoking a lot of weed, but there was everyone was engaged in a quest. And that's where I felt, wow, this is what's different than the sort of, rock and roll, sex and drugs, that I'd left behind, which, I'd been part of. But I wasn't looking for that either. I didn't want really that. And anyway, there were, as you know, lots of Tibetan temples in Bodh Gaya, and I would go to each one, meditate and try, I was trying out all these different ones. And to be honest, none of them totally really connected. The Japanese Zen, I used to go very early.
Yeah, that was a beautiful place.
It's a very beautiful temple, but I didn't really connect so much with the others. And I enjoyed it. I felt I was starting, I was getting that. And that's where I realized, there's a lot of people. And there were also people there who'd spent years in India already, 6 or 7 years. There were people from all over, because in those days you could sort of go in and that was it. And
that's right.
And there were, as you know, there was very little regulation, very little officialdom, and people would go in and literally get lost.
And you didn't have visa restrictions.
Well, not if you're Commonwealth, but other people did, but they didn't care.
But if you were from the Commonwealth, you had no visa restrictions, actually.
No. But
at that time.
But people had been studying music for years and entered into a real relationship with their music teacher, who was their guru. It was a spiritual. I began to realize, gosh, there's a lot more in this culture than, the spiritual permeates a lot of these traditions. Anyway, that's where I started. But what I loved was there was this amazing, like we talked at lunch, amazing openness. And people weren't there on vacation. They were there with an amazing kind of spirit of looking for what was beyond what they knew and beyond the conventions of the cultures we were all part of. And and I think really it wasn't an escape from anything. It was a looking for something. It was a pursuit. No one knew exactly what that was, but we knew it was a depth of there's a depth dimension, and also I think a sense of which I think connects to now what people are looking for. It was a search for something more meaningful
Right.
than just the trappings of life.
Right.
You know, it didn't then,
Right.
And I think people were looking for more meaning. And the East seemed to offer that, or India seemed to offer that. And there were a lot. The other thing was there were many different ways people could pursue that in India. India is such a wild place,
That's
was
right.
then particularly,
Yeah.
it still is. And so you could really experiment in a lot of different ways and be
Right.
supported by the culture,
Right.
meaning people didn't, it was quite acceptable
Yes.
in a way.
Yes.
They were very, very accepting.
Yes.
And so it was, yeah.